flavor is an amazing human who has perfected their craft. Welcome to Flavors Unknown, a series of inspirational conversations with renowned culinary leaders. Discover how their cultural identity shapes their creative process. With your host, Emmanuel.
Hi, Chef. How are you?
Aloha. I'm doing very well.
Aloha to you as well. And thank you very much for joining Flavors Unknown podcast. I really appreciate that you are taking the time to be with us. You know, during the course of our conversation, we are going to hit like different aspects of, your life and career. But I always like to start taking my guest into the past. Curious, when you close your eyes and when you go back when you are a child, what are like the first, let's say, flavors, aromas that, recognize or you were, let's say, in contact with?
My earliest childhood memories was my father used to cook us a steak dinner for our birthday, ever since I
Uh-huh.
can remember when I was like 5 or 6. And he used to get this Spencer steak, which is cut like a ribeye, but it's a more specific cut of the ribeye. It's Spencer steak. He would cook it in a black skillet. He would have creamed corn, garlic butter mushrooms, and of course rice. And that would be the birthday dinner for me when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so that being one of those earliest memories, we had to when later on was at a hotel, we had to one of the dishes was a steak dish, and it was inspired by that same birthday dish. So
Okay.
when I was training the servers, it was kind of interesting because when we trained the servers, we tried a new method of telling a story and doing a video versus just putting it on paper, and that's the story I told of one of my first food memories.
Tell me
Yeah.
more about this idea of like you are like telling the story and having a video. Sorry, I'm just intrigued with what you just
Yeah.
mentioned.
Um, so I was working at the Royal Hawaiian at Azure, very high-end restaurant, very
Mm-hmm.
discerning guests, and um, the way we would train our servers traditionally was like, you would taste the dish, you would
Mm-hmm.
have a sheet, spec sheet or whatnot, and you'd go over it. But my general manager was thinking outside the box, and he said, "You know what, John, you're a good storyteller, and I
Uh-huh.
think some of the servers would benefit from hearing like an audio version of it, so they could because when you basically when the server goes to the dining room." You're trusting them with the journey. You're trusting them with the choices or whatnot. So if that server can communicate the story the way I've created it and told the story, then it has a lot more impact for the guest. And so we created a video back in the day, it
Mm-hmm.
was DVDs or whatnot, and every dish there was a story about how it was created, why it was created, and why it was on the menu and what inspired it. But the steak version, so we did at Azure. We would, instead of a Spencer steak, we would go out and buy this super expensive dry aged beef from Pennsylvania, cream corn. We used fresh local corn, and we made our own Boursin cheese, and we made it like a creamed corn
Uh-huh.
using local ingredients. Mushrooms, we used hamakua, ali'i, abalone mushrooms, and we did garlic and butter, and we, grilled it, and we did all these little different takes based on what I remember growing up as being like the ultimate birthday dinner.
Wow.
So
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing this. So obviously, you are a very passionate person. I can feel it here. And as well talking about, storytelling. So I'm curious about what really first pulled you towards cooking.
A couple of things. So I was in law school, and
Okay.
when I was in law school, I remember I was in Civ Pro class, and the person stood up next to me, and he was reciting the case law. And I was staring at this person. This was my first year, and I was staring at this person. He was so passionate, reading the case law and doing this. In my head, I was like, "There's no way I can go head to head with this guy in court. I'm going to lose. I mean, I can read and write, but that was so boring. Like, how am I going to get that kind of energy level?" And so it dawned upon me that I had to find something. I had to turn the tables where someone would be looking at me and go, "Oh my gosh, I got to go against him." And
Mm.
so, in law school, super stressful.
That's
So,
very mature already at age to have that, that reflection about yourself and process. Wow. Great.
it was a fear factor, and because it was very stressful, I used to cook all the time because whenever I cooked, I was in the kitchen. I was going to law school with my brother and some other
Mm-hmm.
kids from Hawaii, And so it was very therapeutic for me. When I was in the kitchen, I would be watching all the Great Chef series. I would be immersed. This is before the Food Network. I'd be immersed in just creating food and just letting all the stress go. That was like my sanctuary place. And so after the first year, that's when I made the move. During my year in law school, I got hooked up with Russell Sue. He was a chef in Hawaii, and he was part of the Pacific Club. There's a corporation, Pacific Club. They have like high end dining in clubs in
Mm-hmm.
major cities. And so when I was in law school, they set it up for a stage. So I went in there in my Aloha shirt and Birkenstocks, and I was there for like 13 hours, and I was like watching, the filet mignon and the olive oil and the garlic and the herbs, and they were basting fish, and they were talking in some language I never heard before, 86 behind you, and all these things in the kitchen. And I was hooked, and I was like, this is exactly what I want to do.
Right.
And so after the first year, I applied for Roy's and Alan Wong's,
Mm-hmm. Oh
and
yeah.
they laughed at me. They didn't laugh, but they're like, "You're applying. Have you ever gone to culinary school?" I said, "No." Have you any experience in the kitchen? I said, "No." I said, so they said, "What are you applying for?" I said, "Well, I'm applying. I want to learn how to cook. How do I get in?" And so they said, "Well, we have a dishwasher position open if you
Oh.
really want to
Hmm.
see how bad you want it." And so that's how I ended up at Roy's and Alan Wong's as a dishwasher, and I worked part time for both of them, and then worked my way up.
Wow.
But I
Okay.
made a deal with them. I made a deal. I said, "Hey, if I'm gonna wash dishes, I get to come in on my own time, and I get to work with the chef making sauces or whatnot." So it was kind of a trade apprenticeship. I would go in 4 hours early, make all the sauces, do all the sauce work, and then go out bang out some dishes. A few hours.
That was a good approach. I mean, there's a lot of things to from the young generation to learn from from that approach of negotiation. It's pretty cool, I have to say. Very good. So you continue obviously your training, and then you obviously in Hawaii and as well in other high level kitchen mainland. So what did living Hawaii teach you about Hawaii?
I think I went in a full circle. When I was working at Alan Wong's,
Yeah.
they had a program for young chefs. They call it the Next Generation Dinners, where if you're a cook and you had enough specials that was approved by the chef, by Alan,
Mhm.
then you could create a menu, and the restaurant would market it and sell it on a Sunday, and you could invite all your friends and family, and you could showcase your menu. And so after doing that a few times, I
Wow.
realized, Chef Allen used to train us, are you a student of the game? Do you know who the major chefs are in every city? What's going on? And so studying under him and understanding, like, I had to go to the mainland because I had worked
Yeah.
at the restaurants I wanted to on Oahu, and I had, was able to showcase my menu, but I knew that there was a lot more out there just because he made us really focus on reading. Back in the day before social media, there was there was food arts, there was art culinaire. There were
Hmm.
these things you had to wait like every quarter to read it, and it was all these amazing things happening all over the world. So I packed up my bags and left for New York, and I went. I wanted to work at a hotel or travel abroad, and so I wanted to go to school, get a diploma, and then work up in New York City because it was the greatest food city at that time for me.
Hmm.
And so I packed up my bags and left to the mainland. And I didn't want to have anything to do with what we were doing for the last few years, Hawaii regional cuisine. I would go up to at one of the restaurants I was working at was number 3 in the world at that time. And then when it was slow, they would have these Iron Chef contests, and all the cooks would challenge each other. And they would make fun of me. They're like, "Oh, like, what is this 1990 Hawaiian food, because they would make fun of the things that are stacked or whatever the cuisine was. So it put a chip on my shoulder. I was like, okay, well, the more I challenged them, the more I worked, the more I learned. And we were learning. We had chefs coming in from all over, like Fat Duck. We had
Hmm.
even El Bulli. The chefs would come over to some of the restaurants, and we would see. There was so much talent in New York, and there's so much to see that. And you would learn from all the greats, all the
Hmm.
classical greats. And so there was a lot of stimulation, constant stimulation. And I wanted to get away as far as I could from Hawaii regional cuisine because that stuff, to me, it was like, it's old fashioned, this is
Hmm.
not the modern age and all that. But after going through all my New York experience and, training in Japan and training all over the world, different places in the world, I realized that it was so important that my best dishes or my dishes that made the people most happy were my dishes that I created from my experience growing up. So a lot of my cuisine is based on classic traditions, and I can take everything I've learned and sort of merge them with dishes I grew up with using local
Hmm.
ingredients, and those have the most impact. These are things that I would serve royalty. I would serve my mom and my dad. I would serve because it has so much soul and depth into combining and merging everything together. So what I learned was that I had to go and experience all these things. I had to try and get away from Hawaii regional cuisine. And then I had to go back and dive in. And then now what we're doing at our three restaurants, we're doing very classical, modern, different versions of classical like Hawaiian flavor profiles.
Hmm.
And there's no shame in doing that. I love doing it. I love showcasing who this is who I am. I had to go through that process to figure out, hey, you know what? This is you, and you're at your best when you do what you know, which is growing up in Hawaii and using the ingredients and having your relationships with the farmers and the ranchers and the fishermen and combining all those together.
But so how do you navigate this, I would say, almost tension between this local food and memories that you talk about and this outside expectation of island cuisine, that the tourists have when they come to Hawaii?
We instead of trying to create a dish for the audience, it's more important to focus on creating the dish that whatever like, there's a certain feeling you have when you're connected with food, like this is gonna hit. And this is what we're going to make. And then you sort of create the storyline about it or whatnot. And, we have so many. It's fun because I've been trained this way since I was a dishwasher at Roy's and Allen's. Like, these guys cooked all over the world, and they would always take local ingredients and put a twist on it, and not to the expectations. I've worked at hotels, and they were trying to make us do like coconut firecracker shrimp and run around the room with a pineapple and all this stuff, which was like, I have boundaries, right? And so you don't want to go in that direction. You don't want to go in that direction. But if you make a version of something local and you refine it, and there's a certain there's a thought process behind it. People will know, and if it tastes good and if it looks good, um, it'll work.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
So if there's like certain ingredients that feels deeply, Hawaiian to you, that's something that's, you are going to or you are drawn to, like, using in your dishes.
Yeah, more, yes. I would say there are certain ingredients, but there is also certain flavor profiles. And
Okay.
so
Like
so
what?
for
Yeah.
instance, growing up in Hawaii, you have like a local palate, right? And when I say local palate, it stems from plate lunches, right? There's a common theme in there. There's a creaminess from the mac salad. There is a sweet and salty component from the shoyu and sugar that's present. There's different forms of this though, right? So for instance, the flavor profiles are there's a common thread that connects the flavor profiles of growing up in Hawaii that not necessarily you can replicate on the mainland, or it's just different, right? So for instance, I do a class for STEM, the kids in high school, and we do a thing on your taste buds where all the sweet, salty, bitter on
Hmm.
your thing. And then what can you, instead of salt, what can you use? Well, you can use shoyu, fish sauce. You can use, instead of acid, instead of lemon, what can you use? Vinegar, alcohol, water, right? So if you look at a local palate and you take, it's not just shoyu and sugar, right? There's honey, there's tamari, there's fish sauce, there's all different types of salts, all different types of sugars, all different types of acids, right? And then
Hmm.
all the local the flavor profiles that we have, and so we can take those and sort of merge it in where you can create that flavor profile, but you can make it a little different and a little more
Hmm.
refined. But there's commonalities in all the different cultures that have that same flavor profile.
Okay, very cool. And how would you describe, like the food scene in Hawaii? I mean, I know it's difficult because there's, obviously multiple islands and so on. But maybe if you want to highlight, some specificities, but the culinary scenes in Hawaii today.
The culinary scene in Hawaii. So for me, I've always felt that our islands are like the last frontier. And when I say the last frontier, it's like it's the last place that has not been discovered as far as what ingredients we have. I mean, if you follow, art culinaire, or all these major culinary things, they've gone to Mexico, they've gone to Peru, they've
Yeah.
gone to Asia, they've gone to, they've gone to all these different continents, African, Philippines, whatever. But in Hawaii, it's just beginning, right? So people are learning what opihi is, of what Kauai rock salt is, of our, we have indigenous like honeys and chocolates, that grow on the equator, all these different things that for chefs like across the globe, it's like, holy cow, like this stuff, different types of limu, it's all
Mm.
exotic to them, stuff that we grew up with,
Mm-hmm.
things that we're familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
but the rest of the world is not. So I always feel like our culinary scene is like the last frontier.
And what do you think it is that? I mean, do you think because people had a certain preconceived notion of island food and they said there's nothing for us to discover there? Or why do you think that people were more excited to see what's in Peru, which I understand it's a very dynamic and very exciting food scene? I've been to Lima, so
Yeah.
I've tasted it. But it's amazing for me that obviously Hawaii is one of the states, in the United States, and that it is still for you, the way you talk about it, this last frontier that still needs to be discovered.
Yeah. Well, I think social media has a lot to do with it. And I think the misconceptions or the preconceptions of, like, when people say Hawaii, it's like, they think about Elvis, Blue Hawaii, pineapples, right?
Yeah,
So,
there's many years of,
right.
happened in
So,
between.
right.
Yeah,
But if someone talks about Peru, what is Peruvian food?
sure.
Right? If someone says, "Hey, what's Hawaiian food?" It's hula and pineapples and coconuts. I already know what it is, but they don't know what it is. It's just what this media has put out there, right? So
Mm,
now I think because of social media, you're getting people that are experiencing some of the indigenous ingredients that we have that you can't find anywhere, and it's kind of mind blowing because
mhm,
now you can access it like you've never accessed it before. When I was working with Chef Alan and Roy, all those ingredients were just becoming available. When I went to New York and I came back, the availability and the access was even greater. And now I'm looking at all these local ingredients and I'm looking at all these proteins and I'm looking at all these things
mhm,
available that you just couldn't get before. And
mhm,
so in the last 20 years, what Hawaii regional cuisine has accomplished was to make local ingredients more mainstream, which is super important. I mean, we still have a lot of work to do, but people take that for granted. Like you couldn't access a lot of these ingredients before, like local beef, local chicken, fresh produce that you couldn't just find at the supermarket. You had to get it flown in or whatever. But now
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just it's easily
Mhm,
accessible. So I think the media had something to do with it, and just having access to ingredients. And a lot of people traveling now, they don't want to go to Waikiki. They don't want to just go to Waikiki and stay there. They want to go out, see the North Shore. They
good.
want to go see the East Coast. They want to see what the locals do. They want to
Mhm,
eat what the locals eat. And they're
mhm,
discovering, hey, you know what? The locals, they don't even eat pineapple on their food. Hey, you know what? The locals, they don't even like, all I thought is completely wrong, right? So
mhm,
now there's this awakening, or this consciousness is awakening of the collective that are looking at our islands as, wow, this is a resource. These
mhm.
are things that are actually legitimate, right?
I just want to do a quick pause here, just because you mentioned Roy Yamaguchi, and I just want to thank him because it's because of him that we met,
Yeah,
and he introduced each other at the Hawaiian Food and Wine Festival, and it was on the island of Maui, and it was end of last year. So
yeah.
thank you, Chef Roy. So let's talk about your place or places, but let's say the feast concept. So if you can talk to us and share what's the type of food and the concept that is behind feast.
So feast was a concept that was created. I've worked only in before feast. I've only worked in signature hotels, restaurants, very high end fine dining stuff. That was my path from New York, from Hawaii to New York and back. And so after working so long, I really wanted to have my own restaurant. But I understood from the business side that in order to create a sustainable restaurant that I could manage and own, I would have to create a concept that was more accessible. And so I created this concept called Refined Grinds,
Mm-hmm.
which was based on a TV show that we did at one of the hotels. But it's basically taking local dishes. It could be simple classical dishes and just making it refined. So if we're making, for instance, we have this dish called salt beef watercress, which is it's kind of like a pot au feu. It's like
Mm-hmm.
clear broth, beef, whatnot with watercress, right? Sometimes when we open, we would serve local Big Island beef cheeks. We would make a clear consomme and with a broth, and we'd do the fresh Sumida Farms watercress, and then we would put a piece of foie gras on top. Yeah, it's like a very simple homey dish of like beef, watercress, and a broth, but then
Uh-huh.
with the foie gras on top. So it's a little twist to it. We would do a Filipino dish called lechon, which is a
Mm-hmm.
crispy pork belly. But we would take the whole pork belly. We would do it two styles. So I merged like Chinese roast pork. We would marinate it for like 24 hours, then we'd roll it up and sous vide it for 24 hours so it was completely soft. And then we would blast it in the oven and crisp it up. And then we would fry it like a chicharron and crispy. And then we'd have the Filipino sauce with the garlic and soy. And so you would have these things at like a takeout place. You'd have a 24-hour sous vide pork belly. You'd have foie gras that we would serve. You had all these takes on very humble dishes. And
Mm-hmm. And
this
was
was the
the
concept.
another signature dish that you are known for, which is the Hawaiian style lobster roll. Was
Yeah.
it part of that as well, and that the same approach, or it was completely different?
So one of my cooks just asked me today. They go because we have a stage in today, and they're asking how did the lobster roll come created, and we're like, wow, this is a mind blow. So during COVID,
Yeah.
this is our most popular dish by far. We outsell everything 5 to 1. So during COVID, my
Wow.
wife goes, "Hey, you gotta make a lobster roll." And I said, "Are you crazy? People are losing their jobs. It's
Yeah.
the restaurants are closing. That's a super expensive ingredient. Like, why would I put something so expensive on at a takeout place?" And she's like, "You gotta do it because it's good." And I said, "Okay." And so as the universe would happen, because we had COVID, the food and wine event that we were gonna do was canceled.
Mm-hmm.
And for that event, I had already created a lobster roll, a Kona lobster roll. So I was like, I'll just use the recipe and we'll run it as a special. So that thing went viral. That thing went crazy.
Wow.
That thing went viral where we were selling like when it was busy, 300 lobster rolls a day.
Oh my
From the
gosh.
time we opened the door, I told the guys, "Hey, use the bathroom, man. You're not gonna have a break." When we opened the door, we would get hammered, firing 20, firing 30, firing 20, firing 30, firing 30, firing 30. The whole day, we would sell like one per minute. It was crazy. It was bonkers. It lasted for like a year. But I didn't realize that people during COVID, they couldn't go out and spend money. So they wanted to have
Mm-hmm.
something, an experience that they could feel like they were still enjoying themselves and, spending on luxury. And, we would buy out different companies and factories of lobster. And it
Wow.
came so crazy that, to this day, that's all we do at the farmer's market is we just sell lobster rolls over there.
So,
Uh,
so what did make it Hawaiian style? Is it
so
pineapple? Is it,
no, it's our pineapple whispers. Um, Well, first of all, we use like Hawaiian the sweet roll, sweet bread. We toast it in butter, so it gives
uh-huh.
it it's a little,
Yeah.
it's
Mm-hmm.
nice, soft, buttery. And then we make this umami sauce, which is a lot of local flavors. There's like bonito soy. There's like grated
Mm.
certain onion, sweet Maui sweet onion, and stuff like that. But the flavor is local. It's very simple. Not too many overpowering flavors, but just simple lobster, butter, lemon, fresh herbs, local herbs, and that umami sauce is what we put in. But
Okay.
that has been, yeah, our number one seller since COVID. Crazy.
So I'm always curious when I hear about signature dishes because it's like the dilemma between the business person that says, "Oh my gosh, yes, okay, I need that on my menu," and then because as well people come back to it because they want something familiar that they know. But on the other hand, is it like a trap as well for chefs because there's not really then not enough space for creativity, or how do you feel about signature dishes?
Well, normally I would say, it's walking that tightrope, right? Because the lobster roll is I wouldn't say it's my finest work or my favorite dish, but it makes people like it makes everyone happy. Like I look in my dining room, you get the state garbage guys coming in to pick up lobster rolls. You have the downtown people dressed up in nice suits or whatever coming into lobster rolls. You have the older senior citizens coming in to eat it. You have the young kids from the college. It brings people together. So when I
Hmm.
look at that title of signature or whatnot, it doesn't really matter. What
Yeah,
matters is
exactly.
that you create something that brings people together. And so if they want to call it signature, yeah, I don't mind. It's our best seller, so it's good
Yeah,
for
yeah, you
business.
don't mind either. Yeah, absolutely. I get it. So let's talk about the creative, aspect. So when you are thinking about like bringing like a new dish on the menu, what usually comes first for you? It's like, is it the storytelling, the memory aspect, that we talked about before? Is it like an ingredients from the islands that you want to honored or leverage or elevate? Is it like technique? Is it an emotional reaction to something that you have experienced? I'm just curious to see what's your.
So creativity is contagious. And we learned that, in different kitchens I worked in. So if I learned that the more specials I made when I was a cook, the other cooks would try to make specials. And the more everyone tried to make specials, the more people it would be contagious. Like, he's using this ingredient, or he's using this technique. How can I make mine better? How can I make mine better? We would talk about, like being student of the game.
Hmm.
How can we make this the best version of what it is? What would make it better, right? And so it could be, if I have there were classes in KCC that were teaching koji, and I
Hmm.
went over there and I was like, wow, I'm inspired. I want to learn how to use this. I was inspired by all these different applications that it made me go out and just try everything with koji, with different proteins, vegetables, all this kind of stuff, right? If I have a deep craving, like I had a craving for media, and I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna make my version, right? And I make my version using different parts of the animal, which was most gelatin, and how I can make it
Hmm.
into a broth. And I'm like, hey, you know what? This needs to turn into, I see this. I saw these beauty of ramen. Okay, well, let's make a ramen version because we're in Hawaii, right? So we did that. But it's like seeing things, getting craving certain foods. If I'm craving like corned beef hash, oh my gosh, I'm gonna make my own version of corned beef hash. And I'm
Hmm.
gonna make it. I'm gonna turn it up. We're gonna make a loco moco out of it. We're gonna make a super good mushroom gravy, and we're gonna get some eggs on there, and we're gonna make it crisp and salty, and all those things, right? So craving certain things, looking around, being inspired. Creativity is contagious. If I see someone being creative, or I see something that's inspiring,
Hmm.
I'll go try and figure it out. I say, wow, that's super cool. That sounds like fun. Let's try it. And I encourage like all the guys that work with me, hey,
Hmm.
if you and I always tell them, because my chefs told me, whatever you guys want to order within reason, whatever you guys want to order, bring in, learn how to use, bring it in, and we'll do like a rookie class on it. Whoever
Yeah.
didn't use the ingredients, or whoever wants to know about it, we'll work on it. We'll try it out. We'll test it, and we'll see. We'll learn from it, and it creates a very contagious energy in a healthy competition way.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And if there's any ingredients at the moment that excite you?
We opened two more restaurants in a span of 5 months. So I've
Hmm.
been sort of
Yeah.
not been cooking out of the kitchen, and sort of more, so
Sure.
I need to get back and get inspired. But yeah,
I
it's been
understand. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Absolutely.
So
So maybe intellectual questions. I don't know, but I'm always curious to see the point of view of a chef here. Is that, are you looking at your role as a chef to preserve like the culinary identity, or are your job more to reinterpret that identity or that culture?
I think we're doing a little bit of both. Where to me, you got to cook with 2 feet on the ground. So when you
Uh-huh.
start off with something classic, you give homage to the culture or the ingredients that it was made with. But at the same time, you just don't want to do what everyone else is doing. So you want to put your stamp on it. You want to make it the best version of what you can.
Okay.
But whenever you create, it has to come from a source, right? So that
Mhm.
source is teaching the right way how to do stuff, and then here's the twist on it or whatnot.
So you talk a lot about, teaching, you talk about collaboration. So I'm curious about, now you have obviously, three places. So how has your way of leading changed, from your earlier years to now?
Well, it's completely changed. So the landscape of restaurants have completely changed. The
Hmm.
landscape of staffing has completely changed. And it's getting harder and harder to find good staff. And so when I first started cooking, every kitchen I went into were places that every kid wanted to be the chef. And so everybody was focused, everybody was diligent, everybody worked hard, everybody was, wanted to be a
Yeah.
chef. So they did whatever they needed to do
Yeah.
to do that.
Discipline. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back from New York and working at a hotel because the pay was much better, you deal with unions. And so when you deal with unions, it's not the same type of caliber of staff because, they're protected, they have seniority, and they don't want to be a chef. They just want to punch in and they want to punch out, which is fine. But you do deal with a different mentality and you deal with a different level of commitment. And so, that was the first stage of learning how to adjust. Instead of reacting the way my chefs reacted at the restaurants I worked at, you had to kind of take a step back and say, hey, you know what? What are their strengths and how can we use them?
Mm-hmm.
Let's figure out what we can do here. Okay. Not to say that I'm going to lower my standards, but I choose to be in this environment. I choose to work over here. And this is the caliber of the staff we have. So let's figure out what we can and can't do. And so by taking a step back and getting the staff to want to do it instead of feeling like they have to do it, changes the mindset changes the psychology of it. And you treat people well, you treat them with respect, and then you can accomplish. You gotta
Sure.
it's a slower process, but you gotta go. You have to take the time to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
nowadays it's even different. Like with my businesses, I can't even afford to hire the union. The union wages are like, it's super expensive, right? So now being on my own and having to compete with hotels that pay 30, $40 an hour, right? You have younger kids, you have kids that, definitely none of them want to be a chef. None of them want to be all that responsibility. If I cross paths with one of them, I'll definitely share whatever I can. But from what I've seen in the last few years, it's very rare that you see people that want to
Mm-hmm.
make that same commitment that all the places I went. So because we're a fast casual restaurant, we're not like
Sure.
we're not a Michelin star restaurant, why not? So the best thing is that as a teacher, you keep your employees as long as they're working. I mean, learning. So if they're learning, if you can teach them anything about ingredients, sauce work, anything about the business, you can kind of see what their interests are. And then you ask
Mm-hmm.
questions. You stimulate them. As long as they're learning, there's a chance that they'll stay longer than if there's nothing,
Exactly.
there's nothing to learn. I've seen everything. What's next, right? So as long as you
Mm-hmm.
keep teaching them, and it goes. And every time we have a meeting or, I check up with them every, month or so. We have a little personal one-on-one. And I asked them, what are your goals? What do you want to learn? Like, you're here for a reason. It's important that you get out of this experience as much as I'm getting out from you from working here. So what are your interests? What do you want to learn? Right. And they usually say, oh, butchering or, or whatever. And so, I'll make time and we'll focus and I'll give that to them just the way, my mentors have given it to me. But it's completely different. You especially now with Noma and all that, like
Sure.
that world doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That
Yeah.
world doesn't
The,
exist anymore. So,
yeah.
that's the world I grew up in. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember, I chose to work at certain places that, that kind of behavior was going on. But,
Sure.
I could have left any time, but I knew that if I could endure it, then I knew exactly what I was getting. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was getting this is back in the day before social media, right? Like
Sure.
right now, if I'm connected with the best restaurants in the world and I can see what they're doing every day or whatever, you can pick it up. You couldn't do that before.
Sure.
When I staged or when I worked at all these top restaurants, I could just peel shallots and ask questions. And I would get so much information. And I'd ride a subway home back in New York and I would just write down in this Bible everything,
Uh-huh.
document
Uh-huh.
everything. And I would learn so much because just by watching, oh, why do you do that? When do you know it's ready? Or what about this ingredient? But you just ask questions. But you're in that kitchen and that because you don't have social media to see all that.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. That definitely changed the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another things that interest me is that I'm a manager in my day job, and I'm always fascinating when I'm at restaurants and I talk to chefs is that the level of pressure that you had on the daily basis, and the way how chefs are managing and leading teams under that level of pressure. So what, in fact, do you think that chefs understand about this pressure that, and the management style under pressure that other industries that are outside of the hospitality industry could learn from?
What you're asking, what other industry leaders could learn from the kitchen?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Especially you guys that are leading teams
Yeah,
under
under
pressure.
pressure.
Yeah, so there's certain principles, there's certain ways of leading that succeed, obviously.
Yeah.
And when you look at different industry, there's pressure as well, but that pressure goes up and
Mm,
down, and
yeah.
there's seasonality around pressure. There's moments of, there's a lot of pressure of delivering on time, certain things, and so on. But for a restaurant, it's almost, yeah, I mean, it's those time of pressure. It's like constant. There's service, there's
Right.
ongoing services.
Okay, so for me, it's all about communication. If I know it's going to be busy, or I know, Friday nights are always busy. Hey, we have something coming up. I always communicate. This is what we need to do to be ready. And this is what's going to happen when it comes in. And so be ready. It's communicating to all the cooks. It's
Hmm.
communicating days ahead. It's communicating, we have this event. This is what's going to happen. This is what to expect. Be prepared. Any questions? And you do that days before the event. If it's a daily thing, it's like, hey, let's learn from our mistakes in the past. How can we prepare for this so it doesn't happen again? So you are prepared. So every day you do it, we are prepared. But it's all about communication. When I'm going through this right now because we're training a bunch of new kids that are like right out of high school, but it's like getting them comfortable. This is what's going to happen. This is what you need to know. Let's
Hmm.
walk through that. I am right next to you. I feel like I'm like a father. Like I have kids, right? I'm right next to you. If anything happens, I'm right here. I tell them that I am right here.
Yeah.
Anything happens, whatever walks through the door, we're going to be prepared for because we did this to this, right? And so
Hmm.
you psychologically you make them calm, and then they understand,
Sure.
right? And then sometimes if they need to be pushed, then my
Hmm.
voice will get louder, but not in a mean way, but it'll get louder. So it's driving it
Yeah, yeah.
but it's all communication. I feel in different shapes and forms, and not doing it just the day of. It's doing it ahead of time, painting
Hmm.
a picture. If you can articulate communication in a way where they understand and they're ready for it, and then they accomplish it, then they'll start to trust. And once they start to trust, then it becomes easier and easier to communicate.
Thank you, Chef, for your wisdom here. I'm going to switch to the rapid fire question. I'm looking at the time as
Yeah.
well. I know that you have to get to your different restaurants. So I'm curious to understand what's your go-to guilty pleasure food?
My guilty pleasure food is, man, ice cream.
Yeah,
Well,
more flavors.
okay. There's a Ben and Jerry's triple chocolate fudge. I have to make a serious effort to like cut myself off from, like, otherwise I'll eat like
Not
like couple
stopping.
pints,
Not
couple
not
pints a
stopping.
night. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's tough. That and like my wife, she always goes to the Cheesecake Factory and gets that Verona, the Godiva chocolate cheesecake. That's
So
crazy.
you have a sweet tooth. Okay, interesting.
I I never had one before, but I'm trying to cut down my alcohol, so now I'm like drawn towards sugar.
There we go. Here we go. Here we go. um, there's what's your biggest pet peeves in the kitchen?
My biggest pet peeves, if you don't care. If
Okay.
you don't care about, well, first of all, if you don't care about yourself, then you're not going to care about the customer. You're not going to care about others.
Uh-huh.
And so it's very important that you have some sort of, that you care. Because if you don't care, then, that's going to affect everything. And it's going to not only affect you, it's going to affect everyone else in the kitchen.
Okay, interesting. Is there someone that you dream of like collaborating with in your industry that you
Hmm.
haven't done yet? It's the time to talk about it. I'm going to tag it on
Yeah.
social media.
Wow. So many choices.
So many choices. I can
So
put
many
multiple
choices
tags.
out there. Yeah. I was a big fan of like Roy Choi when he
Oh
went
yeah,
from, fine
sure.
dining into like street food.
Yeah.
And I remember I tasted his food. I loved it. And I love what he does with the community. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so he kind of inspires me to
Okay. Hey, well,
cook. Yeah.
we're going to talk about it and
Yeah,
share
yeah.
it on social media. We'll see.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, and I met him before. He's super cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's like, so if you weren't a chef, what would you be?
I would be. I would be a teacher.
I should count the number of teaching and that you use the verb teaching in the podcast.
Yeah.
That is the first time I think I heard teaching from any of the episode that many times. That's really, really interesting. Sorry to
Yeah. Yeah.
interrupt you, but yeah. So a teacher, okay.
A teacher. Yeah.
And what
I
where
love.
would where would you teach if it was not like food about food? Where would you teach then?
I would teach about. I would teach other culinarians about healing, about spiritual management,
Okay.
things that I experienced that I feel is a priority now that has helped me to grow
Mm-hmm.
to the person I am today and just, have that inner peace. And I think, a lot of the people in the industry have experienced some
Mm-hmm.
sort of trauma or whatnot because everyone I worked with, we're kind of all in the same boat, at least back in the day. I don't know
Yeah.
about now, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot
Mm-hmm.
of us have, gone through things that, and no one teaches you how to manage it, right? And
And there was no system anyhow
no,
that was offered at that time.
no. And I think,
And there was no
it's
recognition of that either.
no. And mental health is super important,
Mm-hmm.
especially with the pressure
Mm-hmm.
and the things that don't exist and do exist in your mind. I would say that I still have a lot of people that are in the industry that I connect with that are still kind of hurting and then need to heal. So I would be teaching a more um, wellness, body and mind sort of thing, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because that when you teach them, you give them those gifts, they can everyone will accomplish even more.
I have one question, which is a very light question here, but I have to talk to you about poke. So, what is your
Yeah.
position about poke in Hawaii?
Poke is a classic
Mm-hmm.
standard, and I love it. We feature it at one of our restaurants in Waikiki, Waikiki Seafood or
Mm-hmm.
Hawaiian style seafood company. I think that some people misrepresent it. Some people don't. People do what they want with it, but for me, it's important that I serve the best version, which is local, fresh, and using Hawaiian ingredients,
So, what
and
is
not.
your preferred way of seasoning it?
So my favorite, it's a hybrid between. So they have Hawaiian style, which is like limu,
Mm-hmm.
inomono, and it's more of a dry. And then I have this shoyu ginger sauce. So it's so I love ginger in it, and when
Mm-hmm.
it has that soy and has this other different ingredients, but it's a wet sauce. So the wet sauce with the dry sauce, the limu and the seaweed pick it up like a sponge. It's crunchy. The onions and the limu carry that sauce, and
Mm-hmm.
then with the dry mona stuff. Oh, it's incredible. I love that version.
Okay.
It's like a hybrid.
So, no creamy sauce in there.
No, it can, for me it kind of hides the
Yeah.
ahi, but my kids love it. My wife and my kids love it.
Yeah. Okay. Chef, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it that
Yeah,
you found
mahalo.
time to join us. Mahalo.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for including me with this.